Greetings everyone, welcome to Music as a Journey, welcome to my channel, I'm Peter. Today I am going to do the first video in a series of 5 videos that I will do, for which I will look back on the recent albums released by bands that I have in my collection, and more specifically I am looking at bands that have been around since the late 60s, if not the early 70s, bands with a hefty discography, and also bands whose discography I have either, their studio discography, I have either complete or nearly complete. The reason why I am doing this video is because I find that with these bands, I'm well familiar with their classic years and their catalog. In some cases, I was a teen at the time I got into them, and I bought many of their early albums on cassette, listened to them many times over, and I know the music very well. Again, as an adult, I bought those albums on CD. Sometimes I even bought the CD a second time if a remastered version came out with bonus tracks. So I know the music really well, but their recent albums, when they come out, I tend to get them, listen to them once or twice, form some kind of opinion about them, think, yeah, the album sounds really good, and yeah, I think there's 2 or 3 songs in here that sound really great. And then typically I don't go back to those albums unless I specifically have a reason to. For example, in a video, I specifically want to pick out a song or say something about an album. So the problem is that, as you can see, I know the classic albums very well. I understand why they're classics, why they're so important, but the recent albums are also really good, and I'm just not going back to listen to them. So I thought that was rather a pity, and most importantly, the thing that inspired me to do this was that last year, Judas Priest released their 19th studio album, The Invincible Shield, and there was so much hype about it. There were, 3-4 songs released in advance with videos. People all over the internet were talking about this great new album that was coming out, how excited they were. There were pre-reviews that talked about how great the album was, and when it came out, it just seemed Judas Priest fans, heavy metal fans everywhere were saying what a fantastic album it was. And I jumped on the excitement. I pre-ordered the album. I got it. I listened to it once and thought, yeah, that really sounds like a Judas Priest album. And then I just did not feel any inclination to go back and listen to it again. Possibly it was just because of all the hype. Yeah, everybody knows it's great, so I can move on with my life. I don't know, but I felt it was rather a pity. So that inspired me to think, well, what about some of these other bands that I have in my collection? I also do the same thing. I buy their new albums, I listen to them once or twice and think, yeah, it's a good album, and then I forget about them. So that's what this video series is going to be about. I cannot promise that it's going to be a consecutive series. I have other videos I want to make, so I might mix and match and interrupt, along the way. But anyway, for today, the very first band we're talking about is Judas Priest. And of course, maybe I didn't mention this already, but when I say the recent albums, I'm thinking 2010 to 2025. I think there will be one exception where we go to 2009. I don't remember exactly, but we're looking at that time frame because, with these old bands and in these modern times, albums usually take a few years before they come out. So for the purpose of this video, we are going to be taking a look at 2014's Redeemer of Souls. I also got the copy with the bonus disc. There are these 5 extra tracks on here, which were released on vinyl as 5 Souls. So I have this 5 Souls, extra 5 tracks on here. So we've got 13 tracks on the regular album plus 5 more. Then, of course, we're looking at 2018's Firepower. I think there are 14 tracks on this one. I don't know if anything's a bonus track or not. And then, of course, the Invincible Shield. I got the version with the 2 bonus tracks, so another 14 tracks on here. So altogether, what does that give us? Something like 43 tracks, I think it is, in total there. All right, and kind of by coincidence too, these 3 albums also have Richie Faulkner on guitars. These were all done after K.K. Downing left the band. Now, a couple of things before I give my impressions about these albums. First of all, let me tell you about my experience with Judas Priest. I got into the band around 1983 with the purchase of Screaming for Vengeance. I think Screaming for Vengeance may have been the 4th album I had in my collection, on cassette, of course. I definitely had 3 AC/DC albums that I got first, And then I think Screaming for Vengeance may have been the fourth album. It is possible I had Black Sabbath's Mob Rules and Van Halen's debut album before Screaming for Vengeance. I know I had them all around at the same time, but somehow I think Screaming for Vengeance was the fourth one in my collection. I loved it so much. I remember my impression after hearing The Hellion and Electric Eye. I just thought, I've never heard guitars like this. What an incredible, incredible album. And it, to date, remains my favorite Judas Priest album of all time. But shortly after that, I got Sin After Sin, which is my second favorite Judas Priest album of all time. Sometimes it could be my first, depends on how I feel about it. And then I had a compilation called Hero Hero, which was put out by Gull Records. It was the entire Rock-a-Rolla album, most of Sad Wings of Destiny, and the original Gull Records studio version of Diamonds and Rust, which was a little bit different from the version they recorded with CBS for Sin After Sin. After that, it was just, Point of Entry, British Steel, Defenders of the Faith came out. I got that. That was the very first concert I ever went to. I was 13 years old and went to see Defenders of the Faith. I still have the t-shirt packed away in a box in the other room there, but it seems to have shrunk in the wash. It doesn't fit anymore. Strangely enough, I did not have Stained Class or Killing Machine, although I did have Unleashed in the East. And after Turbo came out, even though I really liked the song Turbo Lover, I didn't really feel anything else on the album was particularly memorable. And even to this day, I can only remember the songs that I didn't like Parental Guidance and Private Property. So my musical tastes were changing. I was either going into more extreme metal or I was going into 70s heavy rock, hard rock. So I didn't buy anything else by Judas Priest. Of course, I knew Rob Halford left the band. I knew that he was involved in other things. I knew somebody else came to sing for Judas Priest. I knew Rob Halford rejoined the band, but I didn't buy anything of theirs until 2011. I don't know what it was, but something made me go back to listen to those old albums. I had only a few on CD at this time. I had a compilation called Metalworks, which was pretty much everything from Sin After Sin up to Painkiller, some selected tracks from those. But I didn't have anything else by the band except for a few of my favorite albums. So 2011, I suddenly wanted to go back and hear certain albums, and then I found out that the CBS series, like from Sin After Sin up to Painkiller, had all been reissued with bonus tracks. So I had to get all of those, except for Unleashed in the East. I still haven't got that one on CD yet. And then I bought the stuff that I missed, at least as far as Angel of Retribution and Nostradamus were concerned. And of course, Nostradamus, there's an example of an album I only ever listened to twice or once. And from there on, I kind of left Judas Priest again, but I still regularly went back to my favorite albums. I did not get Redeemer of Souls when it came out. I didn't even know that Judas Priest were on the brink of ending their career. But eventually, after some years, I finally got Firepower in 2022. And then I heard about this Five Souls EP, which really intrigued me. So I got Redeemer of Souls with that. And then, as I said, I pre-ordered The Invincible Shield. But prior to preparing for this video, I probably listened to this album once. I listened to this one 2 times or 3 times maybe, and a few favorites extra. And this one I listened to once and a couple of songs a second or third time. So I thought, what a pity. These are great albums and I really want to listen to them over and over again until I've got them playing in my head randomly throughout the day, until I can pick out a song and listen to it and go, oh, that's from this album, that's from that album. I can look at the song titles and I can think of the chorus. I wanted to be that familiar with them, just as I was with those old classics when I was a teen. So one other thing I want to say, because this intro is getting really, really long, but I'm trying to set this up here, is that I watched 5 ranking videos of Judas Priest albums just to kind of prepare my thoughts going into this here. And all of these albums rank around the middle to high, basically just below all the classics, because it's really hard to beat the classics, isn't it? No matter how good these are. But there was one video in particular that I was very impressed with. It was by the channel Metal Pilgrim, a fellow over in Ukraine. He didn't rank them like 1 to 19. What he did was create categories and then discussed each album one by one and where those albums fit into these different categories. And these categories were how these, the categories were about important stages in the band's career and how those albums fit in there. So for example, the first category on the left, is that left or right? For you it's left, right? Anyway, first category was essential albums. And this doesn't mean essential albums to get into Judas Priest. These were essential albums in the band's career. For example, the debut album. Of course, it was essential because it was to get them out there. They'd been around for years and it was to get a platter out there in the market. But also the recording, production quality, the band was very dissatisfied with it, and it meant that for their next album, they really wanted an album to sound good. So kind of the mistakes or faults of Rock-a-Rolla made the band work that much harder for Sad Wings of Destiny. Another essential album, for example, was Jugulator. Rob Halford had left the band and they'd basically gone inactive for a few years. Jugulator proved that Glenn Tipton and KK Downing still had music to write and songs to play, and they just got a new singer in who would be able to take up the vocal duties of Rob Halford. So for example, like that. Then there were things like Riding on the Wind, where the band is already doing really well, they've got the flow of things, and just the next album just keeps that going. So interestingly, these were albums like Sin After Sin and Screaming for Vengeance, two of my favorites, right? And then there were things like Breaking the Law, where they tried something new, such as with Turbo or with Nostradamus. And there were other categories as well. So before this turns out to be a review of that guy's video, I'll just stop it there, but I'm going to put a link to his video in the description below. And now let's get on with my impressions of these albums. So first of all, Redeemer of Souls. Again, I was unaware that Judas Priest had their Epitaph tour, that they were kind of wrapping things up, and that was going to be the end of this legendary band. But, you know, Richie Faulkner proved his worth during the tour, I guess, and they just decided we can work together and let's write some new material. Now, according to the Wikipedia article, this album was originally promised to come out in 2012, but then it was delayed because the band really wanted to work on it and make it a good one, and so it finally came out in 2014. My impression, listening to this, what a retro guitar sound. It's really interesting that in 2014, Judas Priest would release a new album with a guitar sound that I'm finding difficult to place, because there's one track where there's a riff at the end that sounds like it could have been something from Sad Wings of Destiny. Other ones sound like they could have been from Killing Machine. I almost feel like, depending on how you do it, you could make a selection of 9 tracks from Redeemer of Souls and Five Souls, the Five Souls EP. You could make a selection that could sound like an album that came out after Killing Machine instead of Unleashed in the East, or came out instead of Point of Entry, or came out maybe after Defenders of the Faith, you know? Anyway, it's a very retro guitar sound, but it sounds really cool, and I think it's very bold for the band to do that, particularly on the Five Souls EP, when you've got songs like Snake Bite and also Creatures. Those really sound like a late 70s version of Judas Priest, and not even really heavy metal. Like, you would almost classify them more as hard rock by now. And in fact, one of the people who did a ranking video, a number of times during his video, well, at least 3 or 4 times anyway, he mentioned that some of the tracks off these last 3 albums, he described them as a hard rock track rather than a heavy metal track. So certainly Snakebite and Creatures could sound very much like a late 70s hard rock or late 70s heavy metal track. Plus some of the other songs, I think also Crossfire, the opening guitar sound of that is really outstanding, because you just don't hear a guitar sound like that on a Judas Priest album usually. So it also has this, I think, a 70s rock feel to it. But of course, some of the other tracks here have that more epic metal feel. Songs like Dragonaut, Halls of Valhalla, even Redeemer of Souls, Sword of Damocles, March of the Damned. A lot of these songs have that more kind of epic Judas Priest feel to them, even with the retro guitar sound. I find Halls of Valhalla is interesting because in one part, Rob Halford seems to almost sing with a growl. There's this growly vocal, which at first made me think they have a guest vocalist on here, but then I almost can hear Rob's tone, And then he changes over to his usual singing voice and then sings this, note that just climbs up and up and up and up, proving that he can still sing the high notes with that Rob Halford scream. I like March of the Damned. There is almost like a reference back to Metal Gods in there, because there's this big, heavy, thumping sound, only this time I think it's not a box of cutlery that they're using. And it does have that heavy metal works machinery press type feel to it as well. March of the Damned, chum, 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 like this, right? Dragonaut is also interesting, particularly because after the main guitar solo, they go into a more melodic guitar solo passage. And this part really reminds me of the guitar and also keyboard solo in Deep Purple's Burn. It has that, there's a guitar chord behind it, but the guitar playing is very almost classically influenced, and same with the keyboard solo. And in fact, a similar approach was done for the title track Firepower on here, and similar but somewhat more different now in Panic Attack on here. So it's almost like the opening track on all three of these albums have a guitar solo part that pays homage to Deep Purple's Burn for some reason. Anyway, overall, I think this is a really good album. It was almost easier for me to pick out favorite tracks from this one just because of the unique sound. It just really brought me back to the classic days of Judas Priest. And when I saw people ranking it, I was actually surprised to see it somewhere around the low end of the middle of their ranking lists, even though everybody said it's an excellent album. So I guess that just shows Judas Priest make really great albums if some of their really great ones are going to end up in the lower half of the middle in a ranking. Moving on to Firepower, I did not get this in 2018. I got it in 2022. And even though at the time I thought, yeah, the cover looks really cool, lots of people were saying great things about it, I just didn't feel like I needed another Judas Priest album at that time. But I don't remember what it was. I probably watched a video or something where someone talked about it. Maybe it was a ranking video, who knows. But I finally broke down and thought, okay, let me get this thing. And boy, does it really sound good. This, to me, is almost like Screaming for Vengeance and Painkiller put together in a 2018 technology recording process. I mean, like, it's like they took the sound of those classic albums, but did it with modern technology for 2018. The opening track, Firepower, is really just fantastic. The chorus especially has so much power to it. Firepower. Yeah, petrify. It's so energetic. We've got Lightning Strikes is pretty good. Evil Never Dies. What is it here? It is Never the Heroes. That is a really cool, again, that kind of epic, melodic Judas Priest feel to it. Lots of expression. Rob Halford really puts a lot of expression in his voice, which I dig a lot. Children of the Sun, Necromancer. Yeah, Necromancer. That's a cool one. Children of the Sun, again, has that big epic Judas Priest feel to it. And one of the tracks that I confess was an instant favorite of mine the first time I heard it is Flamethrower. That is such a cool track. The opening riff has this meanness to it. And then just, the song itself, Flamethrower, I don't know. It remains a favorite of mine. If I were to pick like just one song out of these three albums that just really gives me a kick every time, definitely it is Flamethrower. But there are also some lots of other really good ones on here too. And in fact, one thing that was really cool is just that there are songs from all these albums that have been playing in my head over the weekend. Like on the weekend, I don't go to work. Of course, I work from home or I'm doing shopping with the family, so I don't really listen to music very much. But these songs are popping into my head, and a lot of the songs are coming from Flamethrower, so that's really cool. Anyway, I think this is really a great, great album. And honestly, I wanted to pick my 5 favorite songs from these 3 albums, but already I ended up with 5 just from this one album, plus 2 from the Snakebite EP. I had a list of 5 songs from here. I was trying to cut it back, but now I feel like adding to it again. So just great, great stuff. I mean, this last week, from Tuesday to Saturday, I listened to nothing but these 3 albums, except for 1 Candlemass album I listened to, and 3 Cryptopsy albums I listened to just for a break. Otherwise, I've been really, really happy to listen to these. I could imagine I was 13, 14 years old again, and these are the only 3 Judas Priest albums I have, but I love the band so much that I just keep playing them again and again, and that's how I feel listening to them. That is just so awesome. So then we move on to The Invincible Shield, and yeah, this is a ripper. For some reason, the tracks are not sticking in my head, and honestly, my eyes are not so good to see the small print on here, and it's in my phone, so I can't check there either, but definitely Panic Attack has that Turbo Lover feel to it almost at the beginning. But again, in a great intense song, that panic attack, and then that, Deep Purple Burn kind of like guitar solo in there. Another one I really like is Sons of Thunder, and that actually might be my favorite from this album so far. It's of course a motorcycle song. Gotta have that from Judas Priest from time to time. But yeah, Sons of Thunder is so far my favorite from the album. And of course, Crown of Horns, Serpent and the King, also really fantastic tracks. Honestly, if there is one song that I might skip on all of these, it is the last track on the EP, which is called Never Forget. And I didn't think about it when I first listened to it. I just thought, oh, okay, this is like one of those slow songs you sing at the concert, thanks to the fans, we're here for you, this kind of thing. But in retrospect, thinking about that, the band were actually thinking of, wrapping things up prior to the recording of this album. That song really suddenly has so much more meaning lyrically. I mean, they're saying, we'll play until the end. Like, okay, it looked like we were going to leave. We were kind of thinking that we were, but you guys are here for us. Our fans are here for us, and we know you need us. So we are going to be here for you. And with that in mind, I feel the song just has so much deeper meaning and importance to the band, even if it's probably the song that I would say I'm okay not to listen to it sometimes. But aside from that, I have to say these 3 albums are really terrific. How would I rank them? It is tough to say because there are some of the classic albums where honestly, some of the songs I'm not as into. It's like take Screaming for Vengeance or Sin After Sin. There are songs that I absolutely love and are longtime favorites of mine, but there are others that are still good. I'm just not as excited about them. Whereas these new albums here, most of the songs I feel are just very good, and there's 1 or 2 that rise above that. So rather than a peaks and valleys kind of feel that a lot of the classic albums have for me, these are more like, rolling hills, all scoring a very high elevation, high score. So it's hard to say, but definitely I can go another week listening to these 3 albums, and I think I might just do that too. I should prepare for the next video, and I gotta say then that the only Judas Priest studio albums I don't have are the Ripper Owens ones. And I was telling myself, I probably don't really need to get them anyway. Nothing against Ripper Owens. He's a great singer. Nothing against the band of that period. It's just for me, Rob Halford is the voice of Judas Priest. But in that Metal Pilgrim video, he was playing clips of live performances of the songs from each of the albums. And he played 1 or 2 from Jugulator and Demolition. And I thought, they actually sound pretty good. So I went to the online flea markets and auctions, and I picked this up, Jugulator, from the Mercari flea market here in Japan. I paid for it by points that I had, so it didn't cost me anything to get it. Haven't heard it yet, but it's going to be the first thing I listen to tomorrow morning. And then there's also Demolition, which I have ordered and paid for, but we had a holiday weekend here, so the post office is not open till tomorrow. The person is not going to ship it until tomorrow then, because it's going by post office. So then I will have the Judas Priest studio discography complete. This video has turned out to be a lot longer than I planned it, but if you stuck through to the end, thank you so much. Please do leave your impressions of these albums in the comments if you are a Judas Priest fan. If you're watching this because you're a Judas Priest fan and you want to know what I have to say about these albums, please leave your comments below. I know I have some regular VC friends who watch my videos even if I'm talking about something that they have no interest in. Thank you always to you kind people. Love you guys. But anyway, yeah, that wraps up this video here, and I've got 4 more bands to look at, so they will be popping up here and there during the next few weeks. Hopefully you'll stick around for those. Thanks for watching today. See you in another video, everyone. Take care. Bye. These bands are specifically bands that are... Oh, Miko, I'm going to have to start my video over again because you're distracting me here.